Now, Zambian authorities, they've arrested 3 Chinese nationals and 2 locals found carrying rhino horn at the border with Mozambique. Zambia's Parks Ministry says the horns are suspected to have come here from South Africa. Meanwhile, government finally delivered the latest rhino and elephant poaching statistics after some delay, with some speculation that there had been an upsurge in poaching since the local moratorium, which banned the domestic trade in rhino horn. This, however, was overturned earlier this year. Now, we asked Bonné de Bod if the numbers have indeed decreased.
It is a decrease, with the minister saying that 529 rhinos poached is down by 13 rhinos compared to the same time last year. I think it is positive. I mean, you know, we all like hearing about a decrease, but we must remember that you know, if we look nationally, if we look at the numbers, I see that the press is reporting this as a positive outcome. I don't think that is the case.
Why is that not the case?
So why I'm saying that is let's look at the numbers released by the department. Okay, so if we compare the same time last year, the national figure was standing at 188 rhinos poached. If we look at the national figure now, it is standing at 286 rhinos poached. So almost more than 100 rhinos poached. Now, when we look at Kruger, the same time last year, 111 more rhinos poached. So that's fantastic news. There's a massive decrease of poaching inside Kruger Park. We've all seen the massive effort they've put into it, and we've even discussed this many times here on Newsroom. But we have to look at the national figure. If we just take out this dramatic decreased figure out of this year, then it tells us a very different story. And that is that at the same time last year, as I said, 188 rhinos poached nationally. We are now standing at 286. So that is a massive incline, an increase in rhino poaching nationally.
What could be then the contributing factor to that increase of more of 100 rhino being killed from last year then?
Well, we must look at the criminal syndicates and the tactics they use. So, of course, there are a massive security in Kruger now. So what they're doing now, Elvis, they're moving out of Kruger and targeting other provinces, like KwaZulu-Natal. KwaZulu-Natal is seeing the highest poaching numbers it's ever seen. And then also the private rhino owners. I mean, I visited a private rhino owner a couple of weeks ago in the Northern Cape. He lost 9 rhinos in one night.
Now that is scary if you think about it.
That's shocking.
So, but why 9 rhinos in one night? Didn't he have ample security? What is the situation there?
That's always the first question that gets asked and must be asked. What security was in place when a poaching takes place, especially 9 rhinos? Now, you can imagine this private rhino owner, this farmer, absolutely devastated about losing rhinos, let alone 9. And when I broached the question about his security, he admitted that he didn't have the latest high-tech security in place. He did have some security measures in place, but for him, a big factor was that his farm is massive. You know, it's thousands and thousands of hectares. So he felt pretty confident that his rhinos were safe in the middle of nowhere. Now, I also got a sense of scale of the place when we went up in the helicopter to get to these carcasses. And, you know, Elvis, I've been to many rhino crime scenes, and shame, it was very, very difficult for him to walk from the one carcass to the next. And they were literally 100 meters from each other in a big circle. He also got very emotional when he told me that 4 of the rhinos were pregnant. So he, in actual fact, lost 13 rhinos and not only 9, if you take those unborn calves into consideration.
Now, we also heard about the online auction by one of the biggest rhino owners in the country, John Hume, that he will be putting that forward. Is that perhaps a solution to the ongoing poaching of rhino that we see in the country?
I think before we get to the auction, let's talk about the domestic trade issue. You know, there's so much confusion since domestic trade has been made legal again. So much so that the department issued a statement about 2 weeks ago, and then yesterday at the press briefing, they made it very clear that international trade in rhino horn is illegal and that it is prohibited in terms of the international protocols that South Africa is party to, and that's CITES. They also state that any planned sale of rhino horn by private rhino owners is for domestic trade only. And that's important to remember. So what is important is that, yes, we can trade legally within South African borders, but as soon as rhino horn crosses the border, it is illegal. Okay, so that is the background to the domestic trade. So let's get back to the auction. This is essentially the world's first legal auction, being planned by rhino farmer John Hume. He's been on Newsroom a few times, and he's the world's largest private owner with well over 1,000 rhinos. And he said that the auction will go ahead no matter what. But this is the confusion. So yes, it is a local auction, but this is presenting as a global auction, and it is open to bidders from all over the world, including the demand countries like China and Vietnam. But international trade is illegal, right?
Yes.
So what happens here is that under the conditions of sale, those horns will have to remain here in South Africa until global trade is unbanned. And that's very unlikely to happen, as it has been in place since 1972. 1977, excuse me. So the only way a buyer will be able to take rhino horn out is if when he or she is granted an import and export permit. Now, according to the draft regulations, an import permit from the importing country must first be obtained before an export permit will even be considered by the South African government. So rather complicated, Alvis. Yes. But let's see what happens with the auction. I'll also be spending time with John Hume later, and I'm hoping to bring you a full in-depth report when I return next month.
So this could probably open Pandora's box for us a little bit more.
Well said.
Well, are you optimistic about the picture that was presented by the department in moving forward with the figures, with the statistics being released?
You know, it's always good to hear that there's a decrease. But as I said, we have to look at the bigger picture. We have to put it into perspective. Very good news that came out of the press briefing is the increased cooperation between us and Southeast Asia in terms of law enforcement. The Hawks and other government representatives met with their counterparts in March, and they're really trying to tackle things together rather than working apart, and I think that's fantastic.